Hi there, collective. My name is Cynthia. This is the Obsidian Mirror podcast. Today is Thanksgiving Day in the United States, 2024. But if you happen to find yourself listening to this reading, it probably has relevance for you wherever you are in time and space, because it's a dream that I had. I had this dream 4 days ago, and I've been working with it to understand what it meant and whether I needed to share it or whether it was meant for me personally, which is part of my process. And it's came through this morning, even after I went live on my doing a card reading. It kind of came through this morning that I might tell that story, but then during the live card reading, I didn't even think of it, so I don't think it was to be part of that. But then now, as I've been sitting here and getting ready to leave for the day, the dream came through again really strong, and I felt a massive urge to get online and share the dream because it's somebody's dream. This dream came to me for you. If you're hearing this, either for you or maybe someone in your family, or it's just meant for you to take up this area of study because there's a little bit of history in the dream as well from our actual history, world history. So in the dream, it took place. First off, I was in a relationship, and these relationships are relationships that I know, but they're not meant to be just for me. They're meant to reflect people in your life, and you'll recognize their characteristics in my description, but they're people from my own life. But again, these dreams are not meant for me, I don't believe. They're meant for someone else to recognize for their own story. So the first dream is, I was in, the first part of this was like a fragment of this overall dream, was me in the Pacific Ocean or over the Pacific Ocean in some way around the Hawaiian Islands. And I visited the Hawaiian Islands with an ex of mine and two stepdaughters. And the trip was really intense because of a couple different reasons. But it was great too. It had good things happen, but it also had kind of some intense things happen because my ex had a lot of panic around air travel. And so it was intense for him. It was really, really difficult, but he pushed through because he wanted his girls to have the experience and me to have the experience. And he wanted to have the experience as well, even though he had a phobia of flying. So there's something about that story that is important. It was like a memory, but it was also a dream because that really did happen, but it was weird. I was also sort of upside down in the dream, like I was hanging over the ocean in some way. I don't know what that's about. But anyways, that was part of it. Then the dream skipped ahead and it flashed to me being in sorry, that's the heater turning on. I got to turn that off real quick. It had, sorry, it threw me off for a second. So the next dream picks up where I'm in a military helicopter, and there's like even kind of a storm happening outside, like a rainstorm. And I was over what felt again like the Pacific Ocean, but I remember even being confused. Am I over the Pacific or over the Atlantic? In the dream, I was disoriented as to where I was. And I was standing at the edge of the opening of this helicopter. So it's a helicopter either where supplies would be dropped out or you could jump out as a paratrooper possibly. It was a military helicopter though. And it was storming, and I was standing in that doorway, and I jumped out of fear. Or no, actually I ran and jumped. I wasn't even standing at the doorway. I got a running start. I ran and leapt out the helicopter. And right after I did it, I was really terrified. The dream was very terrifying because I felt like I was being sucked down in a whirlpool vortex of the ocean itself. And it was like a really dark, swirling purple ocean. It was very frightening. And as I jumped out of the helicopter, I had this panic of like, I shouldn't have done this. I might have jumped too soon. I don't know if I can do this, or I don't think I'm going to survive. And then as I was pulling, it's like I caught something, like maybe one of the landing legs. I don't know what even those things are called. It was like a sleigh, actually, like the blades of a sleigh. But I grabbed onto those. So it was like I was hanging off the helicopter, and I could feel, I was even pulling the helicopter. Suddenly I became really heavy, almost like I was pulling the helicopter into the vortex with me, possibly. It was freaky. And then someone behind me grabbed me and pulled me back in at the last minute. And then it's like I was back on solid ground. But I turned around and it was my captor, who was also an ex in the dream. And they were looking at me really relieved that they had caught me, and like in trying to look at me like with mutuality, like, oh my God, thank God you got back in here, right? Like, thank God I just saved you. Like, it was a really, but the problem was I understood in the dream that person was my captor. And all of a sudden I realized I was trying to jump out of the plane because I knew I needed to get away from my captor. But I didn't think I was going to survive the fall once I had jumped out of the plane. So it was this weird, impossible choice kind of thing. So when I turned around, I did feel some relief because I was out of that portal void whirlpool of the ocean that felt like I was being sucked into. But then when I turned around and realized who had just saved me, I was conflicted, right? Because I don't want to be a captive. And so the dream showed me two different things. It also showed me or guided me to look up that this may have relevance for you about death flights that have taken place in countries where they've carried out torture campaigns, where the victims of torture have been thrown out of the plane. Wow, I don't know if you could hear that, but that was some confirmation. So my apologies. I know this is very intense, but that has relevance. And there have been women thrown out of planes and men, in not just in Chile, but in other parts of the world. In Madagascar, I read there were death flights the French carried out against the rebels in Madagascar that were resisting French colonial rule. There were other places too that are escaping me right now. The death flights were carried out, and so that might be a past life memory for someone, or an actual, because there are people who have survived these campaigns that are still alive, because some of them took place in the 70s, death flights, like out of these helicopters. And so there may be some strange relevance for someone here, either with a past life or that had family members that were survivors or victims of these torture campaigns. I'll put a trigger warning in the title of this upload so that people know, because I'm sorry, I know this is very intense messaging here. And so there may have been someone that had that happen in a past life, like that may have had one of their torturers also be in love with them. And that kind of thing happens in war-torn regions when war tears a family apart and family members are on different sides of the conflict. Or someone you knew and grew up with is now part of the fascist regime and you're part of the resistance. But this person that was torturing me in the dream, my captor, was in love with me. And so it's like when I settled, when the final messages, when the plane landed, I was faced with a choice. It's not like the story was over and I had already chosen. This is, I think, part of the message of the dream. But I was being told right then in the dream, if you choose to stay with this person that just saved you from the whirlpool ocean, you'll live a life of comfort but captivity. If you jump out of the plane, you would have went into the unknown. And so that's the choice. And maybe somebody's facing a choice like that. And this is meant as a confirmation for you. What I also kind of felt after I had this dream and have been kind of subsequently doing research, like about death flights and stuff, like who and when have those been carried out? they were carried out 2 different times by the French colonial government. Just that's maybe has significance as well, in addition to Pinochet, right? And they also came back into, there was this joke that the Proud Boys carried out as if they're brown shirts, that they're going to throw the woke on, out of like helicopters or some shit, right? So there's a lot of different intersections where this dream might have meaning for you, which is why I now feel confident with just listening to my sort of spiritual guidance and intuitive nudges this morning that I need to share the dream. It's going to have relevance here. I'll probably upload it tonight after I come home. So that's all. That was the overall message when I woke up, was that choice. You're going to have to either choose the unknown or choose a known life, but a life of captivity, a life that has a veneer of illusion, like the Matrix life almost, right? Or the life of a captive bird, or like my bird, Stevie, which I always have this kind of thorn in my heart over his life. I rescued him. He wouldn't survive without me. I got him from a humane society, but I don't necessarily believe in captive birds. And so there's a mixed emotion about having him in my life, right? Because I'm his captor, if I'm just being real. And so I also help him survive, though, and I often think, like, if there were any way that I could help him find a green cheek conure flock in the wild and they could accept him, that I would give him back to the wild. But I don't even know if that's true, right? But these are things that I think about for myself. These are themes that are being tied into this dream in some way. And forgive me, I know it's a very intense dream with a lot of history of trauma and torture included, but I meant to share it, so that's what I'm doing. So I thank you, and I'll see you next time, and please take good care of yourself, and that's all. Bye-bye.